My name is Victoria, 32 years old. Dad texted, "Get out of the family." My sister liked it. I replied, "I'll stop paying tomorrow." By midnight, they were screaming in the group chat. If you have ever felt betrayed by the people who should have been your biggest supporters, let me know where you are watching from. I was on my lunch break at work, perusing emails when the warning appeared. Henrik's name came on the top of my screen, and for a little moment, I believed he was checking in, perhaps asking how the presentation went last week, or if I'd heard back about the promotion. Something normal, something that acknowledged my existence as more than just a simple signature on paperwork. The message loaded, and I read it twice before the words registered. "We've decided to end all contact. Stay away from us forever." There was no preface or explanation, just a cold, clinical statement that I had been excommunicated from the family I had worked so hard to support for 32 years. My phone buzzed again before I could register the initial blow. Elena appreciated the message. My younger sister, the golden child who never met a family crisis she couldn't exacerbate, had actually taken the time to respond with a thumbs-up emoji to our father's request that I leave. I sat in the break room, my half-eaten lunch left on the table, staring at that little blue thumb. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Someone's leftovers were whirling in the microwave, infusing the air with the aroma of warmed fish. Everything felt weird, as if I had drifted into another realm where my family could simply text me off and my sister would rejoice. My hands were shaking as I scribbled my response. I didn't let myself think too much about it. I did not draft and redraft like I typically do when dealing with them. I simply typed what came to me and clicked send. I will delete my name from all loans tomorrow. Then I turned off my phone, finished my meal, and returned to work. I had a client appointment at 3 p.m., and I wasn't about to let my family's latest turmoil wreck my professional life the way it had destroyed everything else. However, I had always been the one in charge. While Elena was partying through college on Isabel and Henrik's cash, accruing credit card debt, and changing majors every semester, I was working 2 jobs to pay for my own education. When Isabel wanted to refinance the house to go on a European vacation, I was the one who co-signed because my credit was perfect and theirs was in disarray. When Henrik decided to lease a truck he couldn't afford, who do you believe guaranteed the loan? Elena needed a car after totaling her 3rd one, who signed as the primary borrower. Because her credit was so bad that no dealership would handle her, I was always the dependable daughter, the one who showed up, signed the documents, wired the money, and asked for nothing in return except perhaps a little acknowledgement and respect. I never received it. Instead, I received years of snide remarks about my weight, my work choices, and my desire to remain single, rather than settle for whichever loser they thought was acceptable. Elena told me that my dress choices would destroy the aesthetic of family portraits. Therefore, I was eliminated. I was chastised about being selfish because I couldn't drop everything to help them move furniture, dog sit, or drive 3 hours to a cousin's baby shower. But I kept showing up. I continued signing. I continued to be the safety net because that is what families do, right? You help each other. You assist when things are difficult. Apparently, the philosophy only flowed one way. I turned my phone back on during my drive home from work, and it immediately began shaking as if it were having a seizure. Texts, missed calls, and voicemails. The family group chat, which I joined years ago, but rarely used unless someone required something from me, had become extremely active. I waited until I was parked in my apartment complex to open it. "Elena, are you serious now? Isabel and Victoria, how could you threaten us like this? This is why we made our decision. Henrik, you are vengeful and selfish. Elena, you are literally attempting to destroy us. Isabel, please rethink. Let's talk about it like grown-ups. Elena, I need my automobile. Victoria, I have a job." That one almost had me laughing. Elena had been working at the same boutique apparel business for 9 months, and she had already called in ill more times than she had worked full shifts. But fine, tell me how important your car is. The texts kept arriving, each one more frenzied than the previous. Uncle Klaus had obviously joined the conversation, and he was offering his customary advice on how family members should forgive and forget. Aunt Margaret was sending praying hand emojis. Cousin Victor, whom I hadn't spoken to in 6 years, suddenly had thoughts about my character. I scrolled over everything with an odd sense of detachment. These people had just told me to stay away forever. Henrik genuinely typed those words. And now, less than an hour later, they were furious because I had agreed to accept their requests. The only thing I was carrying with me was the financial anchor they had wrapped around my neck. I did not respond to any of it. Instead, I opened the banking app and began chronicling everything. The house refinance was in my name with Henrik as the primary borrower because his debt-to-income ratio was too high for him to qualify on his own. The truck lease included my signature as a guarantee. Elena's auto loan was totally in my name with an SSN because she had defaulted on so many responsibilities that no lender would accept her directly. Isabel had approached me for a personal loan 2 years earlier when she wanted to refurbish the kitchen. Because of excellent credit, I am able to borrow $18,000 at a reasonable interest rate with monthly installments of $350 debited automatically from my account. She was meant to repay me. She had made exactly 3 payments before the excuses began. I'd been carrying all of it every month as if it were my obligation, ensuring that nothing went to collectors and protecting the credit I'd worked so hard to create. Even as my personal savings stalled and my ambition of owning a home grew further away, tomorrow I'd start making calls. I barely slept, but by the time my alarm went off at 7 o'clock a.m., I was already awake. I prepared coffee, dressed in my best business casual, and sat down at my kitchen table with my laptop, phone, and a legal pad full of notes. The house refinance came first. I contacted the loaner at precisely 10:02 a.m. when they opened. The representative that responded seemed bored until I described what I needed to do. Is the other borrower amendable to this? That is not my concern. I am ending my financial obligations to this loan. If the other partner wants to keep the house, he must refinance under his own name. If he does not qualify, the house will have to be sold. I'd like to start any paperwork required to make it happen. The representative directed me to a supervisor. The supervisor reassigned me to the legal department. By the time I hung up, I had a thorough comprehension of the procedure. I might seek to be removed from the debt, necessitating a refinance. If Henrik was unable to qualify for a loan, which he was, the house would be forced to be sold. The truck leasing came next. That one was easier. I called the dealership, stated that I was a guarantor on a lease that I no longer wanted to guarantee, and inquired about their procedures about guarantor withdrawal. The finance manager was not pleased, but he stated that if the primary lay could not find a substitute guarantor or refinance the lease, the vehicle would be repossessed. You want to give written notice? He replied with a tight tone. Certified mail. Well, need to reassess the lessee's qualifications without a guarantor, and if he doesn't meet our requirements, we'll begin the recovery process. How long does that typically take? 30 to 60 days after we receive your notice. I wrote the letter before lunchtime. Elena's car was the one I had been dreading. The entire loan was in my name, legally. That was my car. She was just driving it because I was trying to help her get back on her feet after her previous disaster. The insurance was covered by my coverage. The registration was under my name. I could just return it. The thought lingered with me as I ate a salad at my desk and scrolled through the increasingly erratic messages in the family group chat. Isabel claimed I was having a breakdown and needed therapy. Henrik threatened to sue me for financial abuse, which would have been humorous if it hadn't been so on brand. Elena had sent about 40 texts ranging from angry to pleading to angry again, along with a few voice recordings that I didn't bother listening to. Uncle Klaus had allegedly established himself as family mediator and was attempting to schedule an intervention conference call. Aunt Margaret continued to pray, but she also began to imply that I was being influenced by Satan. The issue was, I did not feel out of control. For the first time in years, I felt like I could think clearly. I called a college acquaintance who had attended law school and was now practicing family law in another state. We'd remained close, largely through text messages and annual birthday calls, but she'd always been someone I could rely on. Sophia, if someone co-signed on a series of loans for family members and now wanted to get out, what would be the simplest way to handle it? She was silent for a second. Victoria, is this about your family? Hypothetically, right? Hypothetically, if someone had their name on loans as a guarantor or co-borrower, they'd have legal options depending on the specific loan types. Mortgages are trickier and usually require refinancing or sale. Car loans and leases can often be resolved by demanding removal and forcing the primary borrower to requalify. Personal loans depend on the terms, but if you're the primary borrower and someone else, Sophia laughed, but it was not a pleasant sound. Then hypothetically, that person owns the car and can repossess it whenever they want. It's their property. What did your family do to you? I responded, Not everything, but enough. The years of being taken for granted, the financial burden I've been carrying, the constant criticism and exclusion, the text message from Henrik, and Elena's thumbs up. Sophia was silent for quite some time after I finished. "Take the car," she eventually said. "Take it today. Don't tell them you're coming. Just go get your property back before they can hide it, disable it, or do anything idiotic. And Victoria, document everything, every loan, payment, and text message. If they try to take legal action against you, you'll need proof that you've been more than fair." I left work early, citing a family emergency. It was not even a falsehood. Elena continued to live with our parents in the house on which I had co-signed, driving the car I owned, working a part-time job when she felt like it, and spending her money on anything she wanted. I was familiar with her schedule. She'd be at work until 7 p.m., whereas Isabel and Henrik's occupations required them to stay out until at least 6 p.m. I had a spare key to both the house and the automobile. I stored them for emergencies, never expecting to use them in this way. When I arrived, the neighborhood looked the same as it always did. Neat lawns, identical suburban homes, and American flags on a few porches. I grew up 3 blocks away in a smaller house that my parents had sold before moving to this one, the one they required me to co-sign on since their credit had been ruined by years of living beyond their means. Elena's automobile, my car, was parked in the driveway, glistening white in the afternoon sunlight. I had made every payment for 3 years. I had paid for the insurance, registration, and upkeep. I ate the cost when she got a speeding ticket and didn't bother paying it until it went to collectors, lowering her insurance premium. I parked on the street, approached the vehicle with my key, and unlocked it. The interior was a catastrophe, as feared. Fast food wrappers on the floor, cosmetics strewn across the passenger seat, and a crumpled jacket in the back seat. It smelled like artificial cherry air freshener and stale French fries. I started the engine and drove off. It seemed weird, as if I were taking something, even though it was legally mine. I kept expecting someone to rush out of the home and yell at me to halt or for the cops to pull me over. But the neighborhood remained quiet, and I returned to my apartment complex without incident. I parked my car in the designated area, secured it, and went inside. Then I sent one message to the family group chat. "I've retrieved my automobile. Elena can arrange for alternate transportation." I didn't wait for their reply. I stopped the conversation and prepared for my evening gym class. The fallout was nuclear. When I arrived back from the gym, I was sweating, endorphin high, and feeling more like myself than I had in months. My phone had virtually melted due to the frequency of incoming messages and calls. The family conversation had more than 200 new messages. I'd been removed and re-added 3 times, presumably as punishment, before they realized they wanted me in there to yell at. Isabel had left voicemails complaining about how harsh I was behaving. Henrik had texted threatening to call the police and declare the car stolen, which would have been funny if he had really done so. Elena had tagged me in a Facebook post about narcissistic family members and betrayal, so I untagged myself and adjusted my privacy settings. The extended family had also increased its interest. Cousin Victor, whom I barely knew, was sending me private messages, calling me selfish and heartless. Uncle Klaus attempted a group video call, which I declined. Aunt Margaret had allegedly created a prayer chain at her church expressly for my soul. The only person who hadn't contacted me was my grandmother, Isabel's mother, who lived in a retirement facility in Arizona and mostly avoided the turmoil. She had always been aloof and nice to me, sending birthday cards with checks and asking banal inquiries about my life over the holidays. Around 9 p.m., my phone called with an unfamiliar number. I almost didn't respond, thinking it was another flying monkey from the family tree. But something made me pick up. "Victoria," said the voice, which sounded elderly but forceful. "Grandmother Edith." "Hi, Grandma. Your mother called me this afternoon extremely upset. She said you've stolen your sister's car and are trying to force them out of their home. I told her that didn't sound like something you'd do without a good reason. So I thought I'd hear your side before I form an opinion." I nearly cried. In a day where everyone assumed the worst about me, having someone actually ask for my opinion felt like a lifeline. I described everything: the debts, the years of providing a financial safety net, the persistent criticism, the exclusion from family occasions, Henrik's text, Elena's reaction, and the choice to finally free myself from duties I should never have accepted in the first place. Grandma Edith listened without interrupting. When I finished, She remained silent for a few seconds. Your grandfather and I loaned your mother money once when she and your father were young and struggling, $4,500, which was a lot back then. We agreed they'd pay it back when they could. They never did, not $1. When we brought it up years later, your mother said she didn't remember it as a loan, that she thought it was a gift. She seemed genuinely confused that we expected repayment. She sighed, and I could hear her shifting in her chair, the phone rustling against fabric. Some people go through life believing that the world owes them unconditional support. Your mother is one of those individuals, and she trained Elena to be the same way. I'm sorry they treated you like an ATM instead of a daughter, but you're doing the right thing by defending yourself, even if they don't realize it. We talked for another 20 minutes. She told me stories about my grandfather, who died when I was 12, and how he insisted on financial independence and integrity. She inquired about my employment, residence, and life outside of the familial chaos. She listened as if my responses mattered. Before we hung up, she continued, I'm rewriting my will next week. I had planned to split my fortune between your mother and her brother, but I think I'll make some changes. You deserve family support, even if it comes after I'm gone. I attempted to disagree, but she gently shut me down. Victoria, let an old woman do what she wants with her own money. It'll give me peace. After that call, the family's panic felt more controllable, as if I had at least one person on my side who understood. The following 2 weeks were a masterclass in boundary enforcement. I blocked Elena's phone number after she sent me a series of angry messages that bordered on insane. Isabel's calls were filtered, so they went straight to voicemail. I did listen to them on occasion, morbidly fascinated about the rising manipulation tactics. Henrik attempted to have his lawyer send me a threatening letter, but because I hadn't done anything wrong, it was just bluster. The house refinancing procedure moved forward. Henrik applied to refinance the mortgage in his own name and was understandably denied. The loan servicer initiated proceedings for a forced sale. I called a real estate attorney to ensure that my interests were protected and that I would receive my share of the equity when the house sold. The truck lease was easier. The dealership issued Henrik a letter requiring that he supply a new guarantor or return the vehicle. He found someone at work who agreed to co-sign, most likely without fully comprehending what he was getting into. So, at least the issue was resolved without the truck being repossessed. Elena's transit problem became a full-fledged tale on social media. She tweeted about the injustice of her automobile being stolen by her awful sister on a regular basis, conveniently ignoring the fact that it was never her car in the first place. She set up a GoFundMe page to seek funds for a new vehicle, which raised approximately $270 before people allegedly became tired of her narrative. Isabel and Henrik eventually bought her an old Honda Civic from Craigslist, which she promptly complained about online because it wasn't new and lacked the things she desired. I viewed everything from a distance. My social media accounts were closed down, and all I felt was a weird sense of relief that I was no longer a part of the circus. Work became my sanctuary. I poured myself into initiatives, volunteered for extra tasks, and worked late to assist colleagues who were overburdened. My manager noticed and brought it up at a one-on-one meeting. You've really stepped up lately, Victoria. The client presentation last week was exceptional, and I've heard great things about how you're mentoring the new hires. Thanks. I've just had some extra energy to redirect recently. She smiled knowingly. Sometimes removing dead weight from our personal life allows us to grow professionally. Keep it up. We're discussing promotions in the coming months, and your name is definitely on the list. I exited the conference feeling lighter than I had in years. 3 months later, I received the promotion, a promotion to senior account manager with a 15% rise. The extra money went straight into my savings account, where it grew until it became something I owned. The house sold after 3 months on the market. It was a decent property in a good school district, so it sold quickly despite the forced sale circumstances. After paying off the mortgage and deducting the realtor's commission, there was around $35,000 in equity. My attorney ensured that I received my share, which amounted to $18,000, once everything was divided properly. My lawyer had recorded everything to substantiate the 50-50 division of the remaining equity because I had been making the majority of the mortgage payments for years, and Henrik had paid very little. Henrik texted me, calling me a vulture for taking their money. I did not answer. Instead, I forwarded the mail to my attorney in case we needed it later. What astonished me the most over those months was not my family's anger. I was expecting that. What surprised me was how many people came out of the woodwork to tell their own stories. My dental hygienist stated during a routine cleaning that she had overheard me on the phone in the waiting room weeks before and had been thinking about her own situation with her brother ever since. One day, a guy from my gym contacted me and told me that his girlfriend had been supporting her entire family for years, which was killing their relationship. People noticed what I was doing and saw their own trap situations reflected back at them. Clara, a member of my book group, expressly invited me to coffee to discuss it. She was in her late 40s, well-dressed and successful by all external standards. We weren't particularly tight, just friendly friends who met once a month to discuss the same literature. My son is 32, she told me, adding sugar to her cappuccino. He's been living with me for 8 years, rent-free. He works intermittently, spends his money on gaming equipment and eating out, and every time I suggest he contribute to household expenses or start looking for his own place, he tells me I'm being unsupportive, that real mothers don't charge their children rent. She appeared exhausted just talking about it. Last week, he asked me to co-sign on a car loan because his credit is non-existent. Something in me has just broken. I thought about you, about what you did, and I told him no. Just no. No explanation, no justification. He hasn't spoken to me since. He's living in my house, eating my food, using my utilities, and giving me the silent treatment like I'm the one being unreasonable. What are you going to do? I requested an answer. I'm giving him 60 days notice to move out. I looked up the tenant laws, and even though he does not pay rent, I must formally evict him. Can you imagine having to legally evict your own child because he refuses to become an adult? We sat there for a while. Two ladies who had been taken advantage of for years by family members who saw love as a one-way transaction. Does it get easier? She inquired. The guilt. I considered it. The guilt quiets down. It doesn't go away entirely, since we were educated to believe that saying no to family makes us awful people, but it becomes background noise rather than a shrieking alarm. You begin to realize that true love does not require you to kill yourself. She nodded slowly and raised her coffee cup to being bad daughters and worse moms, apparently. I clinked my cup to hers to demonstrate my commitment to setting boundaries. The personal loan from Isabel's kitchen makeover tormented me for weeks after I dealt with the other obligations. $18,000, borrowed in my name for her project with her commitment to repay me. I had been making payments for 2 years, and she had paid approximately $11,000 in total. I'd invested almost $8,000 of my own money in her kitchen. My attorney offered that I sue for restitution, but the cost of litigation would deplete a major percentage of my recovery, and the emotional toll was not worth it. Instead, I made a determined decision. I stopped paying. My credit score dropped. It fell roughly 60 points over the course of 8 months as missed payments accumulated. The account became delinquent, was charged off, and then sold to a collection agency. It pained me to watch something I had carefully crafted be maliciously ruined. But here's the thing. That loan was going to haunt me for years, regardless. At least this way, I wasn't losing $350 each month to a black hole. The collections agency contacted me around 6 months after I stopped paying. By that moment, the remaining sum, including fees and interest, had grown to over $12,000. I negotiated a $4,500 settlement, paid it in one single amount using a portion of the proceeds from the house sale, and received written confirmation that the debt would be listed as settled and erased from my credit report within 90 days. The mathematics worked in my favor. Finally, I'd paid around $8,000 over 2 years, plus $4,500 in settlement, for a total of $12,500 on an $18,000 loan that was never mine to begin with. Isabel received a $5,500 discount on her kitchen makeover as a result of my willingness to temporarily ruin my credit score. Isabel never mentioned the missed payments, which told me all I needed to know. She hadn't been watching it, hadn't cared enough to see if I was still carrying her weight. The loan had stopped being real to her after she had acquired the refurbished kitchen she desired. I saved the settlement notice in my filing cabinet as a reminder that sometimes breaking something is necessary to fix it. Around the same period, Elena's social media activity grew increasingly erratic. She'd gone from expressly whining about me to posting generic rants about toxic people, false family members, and narcissists who forsake you when you need them the most. She discovered psychology terminology and used it as a weapon, labeling everyone who disagreed with her with a variety of personality disorders. She wrote a lengthy Facebook letter titled My Truth, which outlined her version of events. In her story, I was the jealous, dominating older sister who disliked her for being more attractive and popular. The loans I co-signed were reframed as presents that I had voluntarily given and was now vindictively withdrawing. The car I'd repossessed was characterized as something she'd been making payments on, which was such daring deception that it nearly amazed me. The comment section was filled with supportive pals who didn't know any better, and a few brave individuals who pointed out discrepancies in her story. One of her old coworkers wrote, "But didn't you tell me your sister paid for everything and you were just borrowing the car?" Elena quickly removed the comment and blocked the person. I saw it all from my lockdown profile, feeling an odd combination of pity and vindication. She was so determined to be the victim that she created a complex other reality in which nothing was her fault and everyone else was to blame. My therapist warned me about this. People who have never faced accountability will do anything to dodge it now. They will rewrite history, recruit allies, and cause havoc. Do not engage with it. Allow her to have her own interpretation of events while you remain grounded in reality. So I did. I led Elena to act her victimhood in front of an audience that would soon weary of the show. I concentrated on my current life, the one I was creating in the real world, with real consequences and real accomplishments. Isabel and Henrik moved to a smaller rental across town. Elena moved with them. Naturally, I heard through the grapevine that they blamed me for their current situation at every opportunity, telling anyone who would listen about their terrible daughter who wrecked the family. Some individuals believe them. A few high school acquaintances unfriended me on social media. A handful of distant relatives messaged me on the value of forgiving and honoring your parents. However, I also received information from unexpected sources. My former college roommate contacted me after hearing some version of the story. When I told her the truth, she acknowledged she had always thought my family treated me unfairly, but hadn't felt it was her place to speak up. An old coworker who had moved out of state messaged me, stating her family had treated her the same way, and that cutting them off financially had been the finest decision she'd ever made. Sophia, my lawyer friend, called me every few weeks to check in and celebrate my emancipation. I began therapy not because I believed I had done anything wrong, but because bearing that family turmoil for over 3 decades had left its mark, and I needed to process it with someone trained to assist. My therapist was a no-nonsense woman in her 60s who affirmed my decisions in the first session and then spent the rest of the sessions helping me work through the complicated pain of abandoning a family that had never truly respected me. You're mourning the family you deserve to have. During one session, she told me, the parents who should have been proud of you and supported you, the sister who should have been your friend. It's okay to grieve that loss, even while you recognize that the reality never matched the ideal. 6 months after Henrik's text message, I was sitting in my favorite coffee shop on a Saturday morning reading a book and enjoying a latte when someone approached my table. Victoria. I looked up. It took me a second to recognize him, but then I recognized Luca, Elena's former boyfriend from a few years ago. He seemed like a nice person, and I liked him briefly, but Elena had dumped him for someone with a nicer automobile. Luca, hello, how are you? Good, good. Do you mind if I sit for a second? I asked, gesturing to the empty chair opposite me. He sat down looking a little uneasy. I heard about what happened with your family. Well, I heard Elena's version first, but then I ran into your old roommate Clara at a party last month and she told me the real story. Yeah, it's been a whole thing. Listen, I just wanted to say I'm sorry for what you went through. I dated Elena for almost a year, so I saw firsthand how your family treated you. You were always the one they called when something needed to be fixed or paid for, and I never heard them say thank you, not once. He ran a hand through his hair, visibly upset. Elena used to complain about you constantly, but all her complaints were basically just mad that you weren't doing even more for her. Like, she'd be upset that you couldn't loan her money for concert tickets because you had rent due, and she'd talk about how selfish you were. It drove me crazy. That's actually part of why we broke up. I couldn't deal with how entitled she was about everything. I wasn't sure what to say. I'd grown accustomed to being the villain in my family's story, so having someone confirm my experience seemed alien. Thank you for telling me that. Honestly, it helps to know I'm not crazy. You're not insane. You're better off without them. In my opinion, Elena is still living with your parents, working part-time, and posting dramatic things online about how everyone has wronged her. You're out here living your own life. You won." After he went, I sat for a long time reflecting on what he'd said. I had not felt like a winner. I felt like I'd been through a calamity and was still gathering up the bits. But perhaps that was another way of looking at the same situation. Maybe getting yourself out of a poisonous situation and creating something better was not about winning or losing. It was just about selecting yourself for once. I called the real estate agent I'd been speaking with about buying my own home. I qualified for a mortgage based on the equity from the property sale, the settlement savings from the personal loan, and my improved financial status now that I wasn't bearing everyone else's debt. "A small one," she'd replied, "but enough for a starter condo in a neighborhood you like." "Let's do it," I said. "I'm ready to start looking." A year after Henrik's message, I purchased a one-bedroom condo with a balcony facing a park. It wasn't big, but it was mine. My name on the deed, my mortgage payment, and my freedom to decorate as I pleased. I invited Clara and Sophia over for a housewarming meal. We ate takeout on my new couch and sipped wine from mugs because I hadn't unpacked my wine glasses. They toasted my new beginning, and I felt something I hadn't felt in a long time at a family gathering: genuine happiness. "To Victoria," Sophia exclaimed, raising her mug, "for having the courage to save herself." The family discussion remained someplace in my blocked messages box. I imagined they were still active in there, moaning about me and rewriting history to make themselves victims. I didn't care enough to check. I had begun seeing someone, a software engineer, whom I had met through a friend of a friend. Nothing serious yet, but he was nice, made me laugh, and did not expect me to cure his problems for him. We'd gone trekking the previous weekend, and he casually stated that his folks were excited to meet me someday since they'd heard so much about me. I nearly cried in the middle of the